So today we are talking about judgment. We are on chapter, I believe, 31 of the quest this week. And last week, our lesson was about being a child of God and how each of us is a precious, wondrous, unique being created in the image and after the likeness of God. And it was a powerful reminder of whom and what we truly are. Beloved heirs to a divine kingdom full of everything we need. We are a cherished child of a divine parent. And this morning we are going to talk about judgment, and it seems appropriate to have a lesson about judging each other, following so closely on the heels of a reminder that we are all God's beloved children. Not just some of us, we are all beloved children. We sit here and say, yes, indeed, we are all children of God. And then we leave and go back into the real world and judge rather harshly sometimes what God has created in each other and ourselves. The authors of the quest tell us this week this: judging people and situations and things only by outer appearances is always a mistake. How would you like people to totally judge you only by the way you look right now? Things are rarely what they seem, yet we can waste so much time and energy in dealing with what we think they are, rather than staying centered in our Christ essence and allowing people and situations and things to present us with the good they contain for us. The Jafalas call our judging each other a ridiculous habit. And they write in the chapter, often we are quick to condemn or judge, but when we do that, what we are doing, of course, is forgetting that God is present in every situation, or we are overlooking the Christ presence within a person or a group of people. And then they make a rather bold statement. They say, disapproval or condemnation of someone is, when you distill it to its essence, the disapproval or condemnation of God. Now that's something to think about. We are so quick as human beings to judge one another, and almost always without enough data to be doing that. We have no other way of looking at another person except through our own filters. The filter of our own experience. And the judgments we are making of that person are always rooted in our own fears and our own need to heal. We don't even realize it most of the time. We are unconscious to the fact that most of the time we are judging a situation or another person without adequate information. And we make those judgments based on outer appearances only. I'd like to share with you a story about a man named Michael. Michael is that kind of guy that you want to hate. He's always in a good mood and always has something positive to say. And so when someone would ask him how he was doing, he would reply, if I were any better, I'd be twins. He was a natural motivator. If an employee was having a bad day, Michael was there, telling the employee how to look on the positive side of the situation. And seeing this style really made me curious. So one day I went up to Michael and asked him, I don't get it. You are always positive all the time. How do you do it? Michael replied, each morning I wake up and say to myself, Michael, you have two choices today. You can choose to be in a good mood or you can choose to be in a bad mood. And I choose to be in a good mood. Each time something bad happens, I can choose to be a victim or I can choose to learn from it. And I choose to learn from it. Every time someone comes to me complaining, I can choose to accept their complaining or I can point out the positive side of life. I choose the positive side of life. Yeah, right, not that easy, I protested. Yes, it is, Michael said. Life is all about choices. When you cut away all the junk, every situation is a choice. You choose how you react to situations. You choose how people affect your mood. You choose to be in a good mood or a bad mood. The bottom line is it's your choice how you live life. I often reflected on what Michael said. We lost touch, but I often thought about him when I made a choice about life instead of reacting to it. Several years later, I heard that Michael was involved in a serious accident, falling some 60 feet from a communications tower. After 18 hours of surgery and weeks of intensive care, Michael was released from the hospital with rods in his back. I saw Michael 6 months after the accident, and I asked him how he was, and he replied, "If I was any better, I'd be twins. Want to see my scars?" I declined to see his wounds, but I did ask him what had gone through his mind when the accident took place. "The first thing that went through my mind was the well-being of my soon-to-be-born daughter," Michael replied. And then I lay on the ground. I remembered that I had two choices. I could either choose to live or I could choose to die, and I chose to live. "Weren't you scared? Did you lose consciousness?" I asked. Michael continued, "The paramedics were great. They kept telling me I was going to be okay. But when they wheeled me into the ER, I saw the expressions on the faces of the doctors and nurses, and I got scared. In their eyes, I read, he's a dead man, and I knew I needed to take action." "What did you do?" I asked. "Well, there was a big burly nurse shouting questions at me," said Michael. "She asked if I was allergic to anything, and I replied yes. The doctors and nurses stopped working as they waited for my reply, and I took a deep breath and yelled, 'Gravity.' Over their laughter, I told them I am choosing to live. Operate on me as if I am alive, not dead." Michael lived thanks to the skill of the doctors and his amazing attitude. He was telling the doctors and nurses not to make judgments about him. Well, in this situation, he wanted the ER staff to see all the possibilities. Often we judge people in situations based on past performance as well. We leave no room for improvement or change in the present or the future. A while ago, I told a story about playing kickball in grade school. Remember, I like it, so I'm going to tell it again. So with bases loaded, I was up next to kick, and Mark Sikowski, I remember his name, was pitching. He called everyone in closer, believing I couldn't kick the ball, so everyone came in. They soon discovered he was wrong when I kicked the ball over all their heads and out of the park, and every base was loaded and everyone ran home, including me. Never again was I picked last for kickball, and never again was anyone called in when I was up to kick. Yes! It's a powerful moment. I love that story. Sometimes we judge because we need to feel better than someone or something that's happening around us. Sometimes our human ego gets in the way of our seeing the Christed being that stands before us. Because maybe we're feeling a little scared or fragile or less than ourselves. And from that place of separation from one another and God, we start judging another person. And sometimes, as much as we hate to admit it, it makes us feel better if we can make someone else feel less. There's a story. It's called The Cookie Thief by Valerie Fox. It goes like this. A woman was waiting at the airport one night. With several long hours before her flight, she hunted for a book in the airport shops, bought a bag of cookies, and found a place to sit. She was engrossed in her book, but happened to see that the man sitting beside her, bold as could be, grabbed a cookie or two from the bag in between, which she tried to ignore to avoid a scene. So she munched the cookies and watched the clock as the gutsy cookie thief diminished her stock. She was getting more irritated as the minutes ticked by, thinking if I wasn't so nice, I'd blacken his eye. With each cookie she took, he took one too. When only one was left, she wondered what he'd do. With a smile on his face and a nervous laugh, he took the last cookie and broke it in half. He offered her half as he ate the other. She snatched it from him and thought, oh, brother, this guy has some nerve and he's also so rude. Why, he didn't even show any gratitude. She had never known when she had been so galled and sighed with relief when her flight was called. She gathered her belongings and headed to the gate, refusing to look back at the thieving ingrate. She boarded the plane and sank in her seat. Then she sought her book, which was almost complete. And as she reached in her baggage, she gasped with surprise. There was her bag of cookies right in front of her eyes. If mine are here, she moaned in despair, the others were his, and he tried to share. Too late to apologize, she realized with grief that she was the rude one, the ingrate, the thief. We have a tendency to create pessimistic outcomes, especially when we make assumptions and judgments. We create stories that just aren't true. A Sioux medicine man named Lame Deer once said, "What you see with your eyes shut is what counts." And that makes sense to me. We look at the world so differently with only human sight, not our spiritual eyes. And we make judgments that we have little or no basis for whatsoever. In the book, The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, he tells us how we take on so many beliefs and judgments early in our lives. And then we spend the rest of our lives reacting to those beliefs and judgments that didn't even come from us. He teaches us a new way of being in the Four Agreements. The agreements he talks about are to be impeccable with your word, to not take things personally, to not make assumptions, and to always do our best. What applies especially to us this morning is don't take anything personally and don't make assumptions. Think for a moment what the world would be like if not one of us ever again took anything that anyone said to us personally. Imagine the freedom, imagine the peace of mind. Imagine the energy that would be freed up from anger, retaliation, healing the hurts, and stewing in our stuff. All that energy would be freed up to do things, perhaps like cure cancer or heart disease, problem solve ways to better our educational system. We would have so much more time, energy, and desire to love one another. We would be freed up to really, truly embrace life and live it. If only we would give up the habit of taking things so darn personally. And how egotistical is that of us anyway? Like everything is always about us. All the time? I don't think so. If we give up the habit of taking things personally, we automatically give up the need to defend ourselves. Which means that we naturally give up what the Jafalas call our ridiculous habit of judging each other. The same is true of making assumptions. Have you ever made an assumption that was totally incorrect? We all know what they say about the word assume, right? I can't break it down for you because this is, a rated G thing, but you know what I'm talking about. But when we assume, we are usually incorrect. We're not always right. And I think we probably all, at one time or another, have assumed something we should not have. When we give up the practice of assuming, we just feel better. When we give up the practice of assuming that we know what is going on in someone's life or why they act the way they do, when we are willing to give up that and just love people where they're at, we instantly stop judging them and free up our own energy to live the way we want. And isn't that amazing? We all know people who spend a lot of time and energy trying to live another person's life. Being a lifelong student of human behavior, I've watched in pure wonder as people who absolutely refuse to take responsibility for their own lives believe so tenaciously that they have the perfect answer for how everybody else should live theirs. What was the lady's name on Bewitched? She's the one that's popping into my mind right now. Mrs. Kravitz. Yeah. Do you know anybody like that? Watching them is absolutely fascinating, as long as we don't take anything personally. There is a book titled Out of the Darkness into the Light, and the author tells us, love and innocence fly out the window. The moment we began judging others or ourselves, we recapture that innocence and love the moment we stop making judgments. And Jesus said it this way, do not judge by appearances, but judge with right judgment. Right judgment means setting aside the ego and our history and our need to be right. And oh, don't we love to be right? And it means doing the spiritual work that is required to be fully connected with God. Right judgment is not the evidence that we gather with our ears and our minds and our human sight. Right judgment comes from that sacred space within us where we know. Know with the wisdom of our hearts that we are all children of God, regardless of our skin color, our gender, our age, our marital status, address, sexual preference, our dialect, employment, or financial status. We are all, every one of us, children of God. When we are willing to live from that truth and give each other a break and start practicing acceptance rather than separation, when we are willing to do that, then the need to judge each other will disappear, and the peace we typically sing about on every Sunday will become a reality. Accepting one another as children of God, trying to see each other as Christed beings, does not mean that we are meant to accept and endure unhealthy relationships or toxic situations in our lives. Everyone is born with a spark of divinity in them, yes. Everyone, but some people are truly unconscious to the truth of who and what they are. Some are unaware that divinity lies within them. And some people acting from their ego do harmful things that are hurtful. And some are very, very creative at covering up their divinity and only letting their ego side show to the world. In seminary, one of my instructors at one time said she overheard a conversation between two students. And this is what was said. I behold the Christ in you. It's your personality I can't stand. For those of you taking notes, I'll repeat it again. Get ready to write here. I behold the Christ in you. It's your personality I can't stand. Right? It's that ego side. It is absolutely appropriate that we use our right judgment to walk away when we find ourselves with people who are not awake to who they are, or not awake to who we are. When we find ourselves in situations that are toxic or harmful, we are always called to see ourselves as a child of God. and we are asked to behold the Christ in another, but we don't always need to tolerate their behavior. Jesus had 2 commandments: love God and love one another. My view, our inner guidance sometimes leads us to love them from a distance. But loving each other from near or far is why we are here. You and I are how God gets around. You and I are the way God's light and love gets out into the world and into the universe and around the planet. It's our purpose to be here as ambassadors, not to spread gossip, judge one another, or speak without adequate information. Our purpose is to be here as God's ambassador of compassion, accepting each other, not judging, looking for the good, not gathering evidence, loving the Christ within ourselves and others, and creating peace on earth. And here is a wonderful piece written by Allie Miner. It's called The Angel of Non-Judgment. She sees with her heart, not her eyes. She judges not. The world below awakens as the children reach, hungering toward the light that bridges all differences, prejudices, misunderstanding. Tired of conflict, tired of judgment, ready to accept one another on equal terms, to embrace, to love, and to work together. The tree of life is formed of human branches. Each is important. This tree will bear all the fruit of an abundant harvest. Seeing with our hearts more and our eyes less, our egos less. Our differences become shadowy imposters, unimportant. Our sameness becomes more apparent. We now enter the illumination of knowing we are all one. So I invite us to go into this week, committed to being angels of non-judgment. Let us commit to being more open, more loving, less judging, and living less from our ego. Because together we can change the world. So let's do it. Next week, we have chapters 32 and 33. I've combined 2. It's spirit and presence. And so that's what we'll have next week. So in our chat box, you will be able to find our donate button. If you've been spiritually fed by Unity of Springfield, we tithe to where we are spiritually fed, and we welcome your gifts and tithes. We also have the donate button in the email containing our Zoom link and on our webpage. And you can also send in something if you would like to our address, 417 East Cordelia. We are getting those notes and cards as well. Thank you. So let's just take our gifts and our tithes in our hand and infuse them with our love. You may imagine them if you like. Hold them in our sacred spot in our minds. So we bless these gifts. We bless the givers. We bless the receivers. We know that a great and mighty work these gifts do, and we are grateful. And so it is. Amen. Our special thanks goes out to all of you who have learned to Zoom on Sunday mornings. Be sure to tell your friends, you are how God gets around. Let people know about us, that they can join us. They can check us out from afar. They don't even have to be in the church on a Sunday or get ready. They can just see what we're like. And it's super easy to join us. Just send them the link. So let's join together in our prayer for protection. Together, the light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us, and the presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is, and all really is well.